The day this video comes out, the Weavy channel is officially 2 years old, and that is honestly beyond me, and the support I've received is absolutely fantastic. So before I say anything else, each and every single one of you, thank you so much for supporting me as I've made this funny little scrapbook about my opinions on Ninjago. But when I do look back at my old videos, I do like to look at what kind of concepts I was looking at and my general take on it back then. And one video that I have always gone back to is the first video that did well on my channel, which is called Did Ninjago Core Fail and Why Legacy Didn't. I really like that video, even though it is extremely janky, but the thing is that I do find it really interesting to see how I felt about the line back then. And I think the other big thing for me is that in the 2 years since that video is released, a lot of the things that I do actually talk about in that video has actually come to be. One of the biggest things I talk about in that video is what's going to come after Core, what's going to replace it as the next Ninjago subline, and I wondered, will it be better than Core, will it be worse, will it live up to Legacy, will it not? It honestly was a really interesting discussion piece, and of course, now we basically do know that answer. So for today's video, and in honor of my channel turning 2 years old, I do actually want to look back at that Core video. I want to remaster its elements, talk about what I actually talk about in that video, and decide, has Core still been deemed a failure, or do I still think it's not? Because I do think it is relatively interesting knowing what has come after. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about Core once more and explore, has it actually failed? Now, to remind ourselves of where Core actually came from, we do need to look at what the intention was when it did come to that subline. It was the replacement to Ninjago Legacy. It was meant to be the successor, and it was meant to build off in a different direction. It was actually meant to serve as a way of introducing younger children into Ninjago by reimagining old concepts, so they can reuse sets that they've done in the past and modernize them, but not actually have to explain where they actually did come from. They were meant to be more light-hearted and more fun in its nature, and I do think it does accomplish that in very odd ways, because one of the biggest gimmicks that did come from Ninjago Core was actually the evolution gimmick. Most of the sets, or the smaller to mid-range sets more specifically, were actually coming with this technique, which was basically your set was going through 3 different stages. The build itself was going to go through 3 different evolutions, zing, and make the set better by definition. Say for example, it was a car. The car would be quite basic in its first stage, but then come towards the end, it would have elemental pieces, it would have vehicle modifications, it would have a lot of interesting aspects to it that would definitely make the set more interesting to look at. And the minifigure in the set would always follow suit. Say the vehicle was a Lloyd vehicle. Lloyd would start out with no armor, no hood, he would be a very basic looking ninja, but as the evolution began, so did his outfit, and in the end, you had the fully completed version of the core suit. And I do think by its nature, it does inherently work. It's very light-hearted, it's a very fun way to actually have more interactivity with LEGO sets. Honestly, I'm shocked that they didn't go further in on it. But as I mentioned in the original video, one thing that I did know about the evolution gimmick is that some of the sets almost felt just a little bit half-baked, and they felt almost compromised because of it. The thing is that some of the sets just simply felt a little off. It felt like there was always something missing from them, and honestly, it just didn't really have too much in the way of appeal. And speaking as someone who does love buying Ninjago sets and will find any reason to, I just found myself having no ambition to actually pick these ones up. A big point I make in the original video is that if the bigger sets actually did take advantage of the evolution gimmicks, I do think it would have been where it thrived best, because more piece, more budget, it definitely would have made the gimmick actually function better. But that's the thing, the larger sets basically completely ditched this gimmick. It was only really reserved for the smaller sets. If the set was between 200 to 500 pieces, there was a good solid chance that it was going to have the evolution gimmick. And honestly, it works, but it doesn't. It's really strange. But there were always outliers in the evolution gimmick. The thing is that some of the sets were actually pretty good looking. One of the sets that I mentioned in the original video was actually Lloyd's Golden Mech. I still think to this day that is a very solid looking set, and I do think there was some decent build about it, even though it did have the gimmicks. The other one that I remember coming to mind is actually the Coal Dragon. I, for one, love coal related sets, and I do feel like Coal Dragons have almost been underutilized when it does come to Ninjago as a whole. So I definitely remember that one having a lot of interest in me, and it still did have the gimmick. So it was proof in concept that it could work, it's just some of the sets I really do feel like were still compromised because of it. But to fulfill the concept of the video in of itself, does it still not work this far on? I understand what my point was 2 years ago, but the thing is that looking at it now, do I still think evolution doesn't really work? And to an extent, yes. I still think a lot of the sets just feel a little bit weird, to the point where I just don't really feel like even if they were on shelves to this day, I would actually pick them up. Like I said, I mentioned a Lloyd car. I don't really think that one worked. I also think the Kai Fire Dragon, whilst also kind of looking cool in its final form, it's just another one that I just never really cared all that much for. And I do think the biggest one that I even mentioned back then that I still feel the same about is the Kai Mech Rider set. Conceptually speaking, it is extremely cool, and we've actually seen it somewhat being readopted into the Dragon's Rising sets to this very day. But the thing is that I still think that set, whilst having that idea and that concept going for it, it just didn't really work with the evolution feature in mind. And I think I even said this back then, that set needed more pieces, but again it just simply didn't. And there are just some other sets that I just simply do not think worked whatsoever. The main one that comes to mind is the J Lightning Jet. But here's what makes the core line extremely funny to me in honestly a lot of different ways. Whilst the evolution feature was just really weird at best and I have got a really mixed opinion on it, core is still the product of so many fantastic looking sets, and so many sets that I honestly wish I actually had in my Ninjago collection. To this very day, I don't own much in the way of core. I think I own a couple of the sets, and then I got all of the minifigures on Bricklink. But the thing is that I'm looking at some of the sets as we speak, and I'm realizing that they really did cook on some of these sets. The Ninja Ultra Combo Mech, the Ninja Dojo Temple, for example. Those sets are absolutely fantastic looking, and honestly rival some of the things that we got in Legacy, in both the old version of Legacy and even the new. When Core dropped the gimmick of evolution, they really did know what they were doing when it did come to these sets. I maintain that some of these sets honestly are up there in terms of some of the best sets we've ever seen. I didn't even mention all of them. The J Titan Mech, in my opinion, whilst there are better Titan Mechs out there today, I still think this is a fantastic looking set. For the first basically of its kind, you realize that they really did have a concept and they most definitely ran with it. And again, I'm looking at it in the pretense of this is in the core line. I don't understand how they had half of the line be these amazingly detailed, these fantastic looking sets, and the other ones being these almost gimmicky messes. It feels to an extent like they actually just had two ideas in mind of what Core was going to be. I think they went into Core thinking to themselves, we're going to have a way for the younger audience to get into Ninjago and have a way for them to experience these older type of sets, but also we're going to have some other sets that appeal to the older fans and are very much in line with what Legacy used to be. It feels like they were just two ideas and they just smashed them into one, and this was essentially the product. In the strangest way possible, I really do think Core would have been received a whole lot better if the first wave of Core was essentially the evolution set. Like I said, the set's more geared towards younger audience, and then the second wave of Core were all of the non-evolution sets that were just basically geared towards a Legacy sequel. Imagine if that was the way that they formatted it, because you could then look at it in the idea of wave 1 to get new fans in, wave 2 to let them experience the joys of Ninjago sets. I honestly think that would have been a better format. Unfortunately, we didn't get it, and hindsight's 2020, but the thing is that I do think that actually would have solved all my issues when it does come to this line. I honestly think all of this is to say that the core sets in of themselves are just a really weird product. I think honestly it is just the product of two different ideas. In my opinion, it feels like Core had two concepts going for it and they basically just couldn't decide on which one to go with, so they did both of them. It really does feel like there was the idea of the gimmicky, introduce the younger audience into Ninjago concept, along with the let's make a proper spiritual successor to Legacy idea in here. It really does feel like that is what's going on. It feels like that this is just a product of two different cooks in the same kitchen. And this indecisive feel that I'm picking up on when it does come to this line is honestly reminding me on why I made this video to begin with 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was thinking this exact same thing. I just couldn't figure out what was actually going on here. But with the thought in mind of it feels like two separate concepts in one subline, it does make me kind of understand what's going on. And to an extent, it makes me feel like Core didn't fail. I didn't think it failed back then, but honestly, I'm really feeling it now. Because when you pick up on the idea that it's two different ideas, you kind of understand what this line was. And it honestly does make it kind of better by definition. Because when you identify which sets were from which idea, you realize that you've got some really solid lines here. You realize that the evolution gimmick works when you realize that that should have been its own subline. And you realize that the more Legacy-esque sets on their own feels like their own thing. It really does work. So for that reason, I kind of think it works. But when I say that, I'm still not going to ignore the fact that Core still just feels inherently messy. I always do bring it back to Legacy, and I do still think that actually works even with this idea in mind. When I talk about cohesive, one nature, one idea type of lines, you realize that Legacy is the ultimate example of that. The original line of Legacy was aiming to recreate Season 1 through 5 sets and have modernized versions of them, and it completely accomplishes that through and through, and all of them are better than their original counterparts in a lot of different ways. But the thing is that even when you look even further on and after the events of Core, you realize that Core does stand out even more with this context in mind. Like I said at the beginning of the video, one of the biggest things that I talk about in the original video is whether or not Core will have a good follow-up. And of course the follow-up in the end was both Legends and also the new variant of Legacy. And the thing is that those also completely accomplish what Core didn't, feeling cohesive. Legends has 2 sets and it completely does what it needs to do. You have the Fire Mech and the Guardian Dragon, and they're based off of Monstrosity. They're basically perfect sets, so they were a fantastic follow-up because of it. And even now looking at Legacy 2026, you realize that it still does have that cohesive idea in mind, but they just simply expanded the loot pool. The thing is that instead of Legacy being Season 1 through 5, it's now essentially Season 1 through, at the minute, Season 11, and they still have modernized, fantastic looking variants of those older sets. So Legacy is still completely accomplishing what it did before Core even came out, and I do think that is the biggest thing of note for me. Core is going to stand out because it feels like the only one that didn't have a fully acknowledged idea. But again, and I don't want to keep repeating it, but I really do want to hammer this point home, even though I think Core feels incohesive compared to the rest, it's not a product of failure. I don't think that means Core failed as a Ninjago subline. Is it the weakest of the bunch? Maybe. Oh, there's a good argument for it, but the thing is that that doesn't make it bad at all. If you went back to Core at this very day and you decided to get your hands on some of those larger sets and even some of the smaller sets, you wouldn't be disappointed. You're still getting fantastic looking Ninjago sets. It's just the thing is that there are a vast majority of them that I just don't think are worth actually going back to when you do look at it at the current time. If you were to want to get a Kai Dragon, there are so many options out there, and I just don't think the Evo one is the answer. Same thing for the Lloyd race car, or the Zane mech, or the J-Jet. The thing is that all of those sets exist and they're all decent looking sets, but they just don't beat out what the other offerings are out there. If you want to get a J-Jet or a Kai Dragon, you could go back to Legacy. If you want a Zane mech, you could get the Possession one, you could get the Titan mech. If you want a Lloyd car, you could go back and get your hands on the Season 8 one. The thing is that these concepts have been done a lot when it does come to Ninjago, and Core does acknowledge that, but the thing is that you need to have a reason to pick those ones over those original counterparts, and I think that is just where Core didn't do it. I think Core had decent looking sets that just didn't beat out their originals, and that is what Legacy did. When you look at Legacy, you realize that they did those concepts and they completely nailed it. They are still giving us the best version of the Monastery of Spinjitzu, the best version of the J-Jet. They gave us the best version of so many different sets out there, and that is the point. You need to have an offering that does stand up to the best versions of those concepts, and Core just simply didn't do that. And I think that is the ultimate issue that I do take with it, even though I still think it didn't fail. I do think all of this is to say that Core is definitely one of those things from Ninjago that will remain in my brain for the end of time. I think that it is a line that works but doesn't. If you are a fan of Core, I completely understand why. The offerings that they have is absolutely amazing, but like I said, when I look at my personal Ninjago collection and I think to myself, I want a Kai Dragon, I would go and get the Legacy one. I wouldn't get the Evolution one because I just don't think it stands up to what came before it. And again, that is what Legacy did. They decided to make a Kai Dragon, and they decided to make debatably the best one that we have ever seen. That is the ultimate point when it does come to failure or not. Whether or not it is a set that is worth buying. And just for me, a lot of them just simply aren't that. Like I said, and again I said this earlier in the video, there are so many out there that I do still want to get my hands on to this day. That Ninja Dojo Temple will one day be mine. But the thing is that whilst I really like those ones, and those are the reason I'm saying that Core didn't fail and I actually like the line, it still does show that there is just some weaker offerings out there. Because whilst I like some of them, there's a lot of them I just simply don't. But I think this is where I want to officially pass it off to you guys. Because I am actually curious, is Core your favorite Ninjago subline? Does it have your favorite Ninjago sets out there? I would like to know what your opinion is on Core, because it really is rattling through my brain a lot more than I am willing to admit. I think this is honestly one of the lines that will remain with me till the end of time, because I feel differently about it near enough every single time I approach the subject. By the time this video releases, I've probably already changed my mind on some of the sets. But the thing is that that's the joy of the opinion of it. I honestly think that whilst it has got some weaker offerings, there are some fantastic things in there that do cause some discussion, and I'm hoping the comment section does happen because of it. I'm really interested to know what your favorites, what your least favorites are when it does come to Core, because I do think that there are some really good offerings in there, but I just want to know what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people, and if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Thank you to each and every single one of you. Your support means the absolute world to me. But like I said, that is about it for today, and take care. Okay, bye!